I'd never answered a help wanted sign before. But one cold December evening before the holidays, a couple of weeks before Christmas, I found myself standing in front of a shop in need of a job that had a help wanted sign. Here's how I got there. All my life, I talked about working before. All my life, I've worked for the owner, as I like to say. When you work for the owner can see that you have a work ethic or not, and you usually move up if you do have one. When you work for the owner can see that you're taking care of the company assets and things like that. Not so much in a corporate job. But when you work for the owner, you can, it's definitely much closer and a much more family kind of feeling. As I was standing in front of this help wanted sign, I had not been working for the owner for quite a while. It'd been 6 years. I got my first corporate job. I worked for an internet service provider. I was in my 30s. It was the early 90s, and it was all the cliches. People were juggling in the hallways and riding scooters and shooting Nerf guns at each other. And for a 6-year run, I thought I moved up pretty good, ever so slowly, but I moved up, and it was 6 years into it, and I thought there was a pretty familial feeling because of the wackiness of the whole place to start with, and I thought there was a pretty nice familial group for being hundreds and hundreds of employees. It turns out there were 6,000 employees. I learned that number because one cold December morning, they fired us all. We showed up to work and they said, "Thanks for coming." And all 6,000 of us were out on our ear. And it's funny now, but it wasn't so funny then, just a few weeks before Christmas. And so I find myself standing in front of this little store, which was just a few blocks from my house. I find myself standing in front of this liquor store with a help wanted sign, feeling pretty miserable, quite frankly, about everything. And so I decided to go in. The help wanted sign, it's a liquor store. They want you to know a little bit about wine, it says. I go inside, I talk to the owner. He walks me around the wine department and says for me to tell him about the wine. So I do, and it turns out well. And I go and I leave the place and I walk home, which is only a couple blocks away. I walk home and tell my wife, "Hey, I think I got a job here at the liquor store. I just interviewed with the guy and it was really nice. And it was quaint because I answered the help wanted sign. And I was feeling good about myself, and that was nice." About a week later, when I still hadn't been called, I was back to the same way I felt, at the top of this whole mess. And ironically, I'm walking down the street and I look in the window of the liquor store and there is the help wanted sign still. And something in me snapped, quite frankly. I got really upset. And so I marched right into the shop and I called the owner down and I told him that I could not believe it, that here was a guy asking for the job, lives 2 blocks away. You didn't call me, you're still looking for somebody. I was really livid. And so I can't remember what his argument was, but I argued back vehemently and I marched out of the store and I went to my house and I opened the door and slammed the door. My wife looks at me and says, "Where were you?" And I said, "That doesn't matter. I just got a job at the liquor store." And defiantly, I should have felt better about it. But as I was walking home, I realized that I'd never fought so hard to get a job where you mop the floor. But it's okay, because it ultimately, you feel better to work. So I get there, and now I'm working for the owner again. Here I am working for the owner, and I thought, I got the gift of gab. I'll tell him my tale of woe. And so it's a slow afternoon. I just get there. Mr. Kim, Korean fella, still there. He's sitting there with Bob, the old guy who worked with me, and I'm relating the tale that I'd only worked for mom and pop shops. I'd only worked for the owner, and I had a really good working career up till then. And then I tell them about, I get this corporate gig, and people are shooting Nerf balls at each other, and they're riding scooters and juggling. And 6 years into it, we all get fired as a whole. And I end my story, and Mr. Kim has a huge smile on his face. Like the Joker. I mean, he's got a huge, big, crazy, nutty grin on his face. And I look at him, and I think I pushed him over the cliff by giving him one of those. What are you smiling about? Faces, you know. I give him one of those, and he started to shake and howl, and he started banging on the counter, and he said, "You work for all the juggling and the clowns." And they fired you for Christmas. It was Merry Christmas for you and your family. And he's pounding on the table. I'm like, what? He goes, they wait for Christmas to tell you, and everybody else, 6,000 people, and you're fired for Christmas. And I hadn't thought about it that way. And he thought it was hilarious. He literally thought it was hilarious. He excused himself. He went up to the office. And I don't know if it was having a job, such as it was, and there's no shame in any kind of work, but having a job, he really turned me around. It had been quite a few weeks since we'd been laid off, and he turned me around with his attitude about Christmas, as ridiculous as it was. The other great thing about, I'd never worked at a liquor store before. The other great thing about it was, and it was the holidays coming up and people were buying and stuff, I got a lot of old coins. And I remember I would see an old coin, for instance, and I'd ask Mr. Kim, "Hey, can I buy this quarter off you, for a quarter?" And he'd look at it and go, "First, why? What do you want?" "It's an old quarter. Look, it's 1932. It's your quarter." But I told him, "Here's what it is. It's an antique. My kids like it." I remember he looked at it for a really long time. He's okay. And he did that with every single coin. That was the other thing I liked about him. "Hey, Mr. Kim, can I have this penny? It's a wheat leaf penny." He examined it thoroughly. Okay. I don't know what he was looking for. But having this mom and pop job, working for the owner, answering a help wanted sign, I don't know. It was like, it showed no shame. And, my grandfather talking about, sometimes if you want work, you go ask people, "Can I sweep the stair? Can I sweep the sidewalk in front of your store or something, even if they don't have a sign?" And I thought, oh, well, that era had passed. But I thought, no, it hadn't. If you go in and talk to the owner, even if you don't want to hire you, you go back and make your case. I don't know. The fact that he made me fight for it, I think, made it an especially poignant time. It was only 3 months working there, but quite frankly, I loved it.